disciples have been observing what Jesus is doing. He's praying and he's healing people. And now the disciples have a desire to know how to make prayer successful in their prayer life. Let me ask you this question. Whenever you pray, do you expect results? Or do you just pray? Whenever you petition God on behalf of someone's needs, are you certain there's going to be an answer? Now, I want you to understand something here, and we so oftentimes overlook this. Do you realize that prayer in the hands of a Christian is a very powerful tool? The question is, do you believe it? Now listen to what I'm about to tell you. Like any tool, without proper authorization to use it, without careful instruction about that tool, this thing can hurt you. It can even go so far as to cause death. Now, I want to use the following scenarios, if you'll just bear with me. In Judges chapter 11, the story is told about a man by the name of Jephthah. Now, the first thing you've got to understand is that Jephthah is a man of prayer. Now, Jephthah is also a man who's been rejected by his own country. He's a religious man. What happens here is the Ammonites showed up on the borders of Israel, and they're preparing to lay siege to the country. And they're needing military leadership. But you got to understand, at this point, Israel has no army that's trained. They have very little things to fight with. Their worst need is somebody to lead them. And so Jephthah sees this need, and he goes before the council, before the elders, and those who are in charge, and he says, look, you need leadership. I'm willing to do it. Why is he willing to do it? You have to understand, Jephthah is a military tactician. He is a military genius who valor is even discussed to this day by certain military groups. This man was a God-sent blessing to that nation. What happened to him? When he went before the elders and asked for the position of leadership, there was almost a riot. All because Jephthah's mother was a harlot, and they were from the other side of the tracks. This thing got so far out of hand that Jephthah had to run for his life to the land of Tob. When he got there, because of his former deeds among military activities, he collected a band, a group of fellows that nobody else wanted. But because of his leadership, his honesty with every man, they came and supported him and pledged to fight to the death for him. Now, Jephthah's having one military victory after another, and it's spreading throughout the known world at that time. Now, the elders realize the Ammonites are set to attack. And if something isn't done and done fast, you ever notice how humble you can get when you're in bad need? They went to the land of Tob and they sought out Jephthah and they asked him, please come back. They asked for forgiveness. Please become our military leader. what we find next is that victory now lies solely in the hands of this man Jephthah. And only Jephthah knows that only God can deliver the victory that's going to be needed for his country and his people. Like I told you, he's a man of prayer. Now here's where I'm going with the message this morning. His prayer goes something like this. He said, Lord, once driven from my people, I now return to serve. And so, God, grant me, Lord, please, the victory over the Ammonites. And Lord, make it so great the world will have accounts of it. The world will know about it. Jephthah then says, I will give you whatever I see coming through the doorway of my house as a burnt sacrifice unto you. Did you hear what I just read? I hope you did. Do you realize that a prayer like that, and not thinking of the long-term consequences? Do you remember what it was he saw in the doorway? It was his daughter. He knew now he would have no grandchildren. He would have no life with his children. Because she was the only daughter that he had. Folks, we have to be careful how we use prayer and when we use it. Now, I want you also to remember this. Tradition, 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 which you hear me sometimes harp on often. It was the tradition of military leaders at that time to make such a prayer like that. But folks, a careless prayer or a petition like that can become a real problem in your life. So I'm simply going to ask that now you remember that there was a man by the name of Jabez. I want you to think about his prayer. In the day of the Old Testament, a name, you know, you all your life you've heard, what's in a name? Well, that was the same thing in the Old Testament, and whatever they named you was an expectation of what they thought you should grow up to become. And Jabez's mother names him Jabez because she bore him in pain and agony. Folks, let me tell you, when Jabez came into your midst, everybody ran. Because he was gloom, despair, and agony. He was trouble on foot, and nobody wanted anything to do with Jabez. I mean, you stay away from trouble. Now, Jabez was an individual who was also a man of prayer. And this is what happens with Jabez. He goes before God, and he asks God, and I'm sure all of you have heard that prayer time and time again. He's saying, God, I want you to enlarge my coast. He did not ask, God, make my farm bigger, make a bonanza bigger. A coast encircles a continent. Think about that. Here's a man nobody wants anything to do with, but being a praying man, he uses prayer carefully, and he says, God, that your hand goes before me. Why? Because that way you can keep the evil out of my life, and I'll not be a pain for you as I live. I will be a petitioner worthy of your acceptance in my prayer. Now, I want to read to you several verses of Scripture. Not several verses, I'm going to read to you one verse. Listen carefully. And it came to pass that as he was traveling in a certain place, when he had ceased, one of his disciples said unto him, Lord, teach us to pray, as John also taught his disciples. May we look down to the Lord in prayer. Father, we come to you now and ask that you give us clarity of mind. Father, help us to begin to realize the power that we have within us to release prayer and get your undivided attention focused on the need not only of ourselves, but of those around us who have made requests. Father God, proud as we are, sometimes we have to become so humble to get the petitions that are lifted to you answered. And Father, again, help us to listen carefully to what is about to unfold here before us. And this is what we ask in Christ's name this morning. Amen. Let me ask you a question. Can prayer be wrong? Can your prayers ever be wrong? Sure they can. Let me tell you how. According to the preacher's manual, prayer's wrong when I endeavor, under my efforts, you got to understand, to substitute my wisdom for God's. How many of us do that? Have you ever thought about it? Think about your prayer life. And sometimes prayer's wrong when I want to enlist God's help to support my own ideas. You ever found yourself in a rock in a hard place? You've started into a venture and a journey into life and it's gone sour, and who are you looking to bail you out? Yeah. Another prayer's wrong sometimes whenever it makes a substitute for actions. You have to think here this morning and listen very carefully, because this is something the devil, this is a part of the sermon, the devil does not want heard. He does not want this information to get out. Now, your actions. What's missing in your life and in your prayer life because of your actions? Do you ever wonder about the woman who had an issue of blood? You can tell the story. Most children can tell you the story. But here's what a lot of people do not understand about that woman. She had the right attitude. And she took the right action. And she was a silent woman. You see, if you were a Jewish woman, you were told to keep your mouth shut, carry the water jug, and walk behind your husband. Now you put yourself in her place, and she has this issue of blood. Do you understand the conditions that surround this woman? I mean, if she's got new grandbabies in the family, she's not allowed to touch them. She takes the right action. But do you and I as a Christian do it? She took every bit of her savings and she went to the doctor. Well, that's your first start. When the doctors told her, we can't do anything for you, and she had no more money. Where'd she go? Where'd she go? She went to church. Isn't that usually what we all do? We head to church, we head, yeah, God help me. Here's your traditions again. She went into the priest, and the priest said, I can't do anything for you. And he declared her unclean and sent her out on the street. Do you understand what responsibility lies upon that woman now? She's supposed to pull a cape over her head and go down the street screaming, unclean, unclean, I'm unclean, just like a leper. Sometimes, in putting feet on your prayers, you have to have a complete understanding of who you are in Jesus Christ and what you're going to do. This woman's going to be silent, all right. Do you understand her silence? She's going to obey all the rules and the laws set forth in the traditions of the Jewish people. She's going to keep her mouth shut because she understands what she's going to lose if she's going down that street screaming, unclean, unclean, unclean. She is not about to give up anything. She is determined, and she knows and she's heard that Jesus the Messiah, the long-promised one, is among them, and she knows about the healings. And so she reaches a point in her life. She takes action. I keep mentioning that word. If you don't take action in your prayer life, you'll never get any results. Sometimes you have to put feet on your prayers. With the right attitude, she admits, I'm unworthy to receive anything. When's the last time you included that in your prayer? When's the last time you got that humble to say to God, I know that I'm unworthy to even call upon your name? I want you to know, she moves through the crowd. And she's not screaming, unclean, unclean. Excuse me, pardon me, until she becomes at the back of Jesus. She didn't get in his face. Are you with me? And she didn't do one of these. She just reached out and touched the hem of his garment. You see, her respect and being humble enough, she just knew that if I can get into the presence of God, something great is going to happen. Let me ask you this. Man, if you ever get excited about anything, have you ever pondered what took place at the moment she touched the hem of his garment? I wonder, was it like a shotgun blast? Let me tell you what I do know is the power of God raged through her body, and she knew she was healed. And I'm always believing she's got to be standing there. She's felt the surge of power. She's felt the healing, and she said, thank you, Lord. Thank you. I know something changed. My whole body changed. Jesus stops talking, teaching, and stands erect. Remember what he said? Everybody's fallen silent around him. His back still to her, he said, who touched me? Who touched me? The disciples looked at him like he was crazy. Look around you, Master. The throngs, the crowds come, they press upon you. They want themselves they want healing for their family members and their children. And Jesus said, who touched me?